Welcome to the Safe, Secure, and Empowered 24/7 podcast, where we talk about how to protect yourself, your business, and your team from unforeseen events. We will interview and chat with professionals on a variety of topics concerning personal safety. I hope you tune in to learn more as we hear from those helping you and businesses stay safe should an unpredictable incident occur.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Rita Peter, and we are super excited today to bring you our first podcast ever on a subject that is near and dear to our hearts, and that is safety. Safety is what we are all about here at Parker IoT Solutions. Now, unfortunately, the unforeseen and the unthinkable does happen on a daily basis. We're talking attacks, abductions, and murders. And while there are so many topics on safety that we will be discussing, we're going to begin on our podcast with a facet that hits home for me personally, not only because I am a woman, but I'm a Native American woman. And there's an ongoing crisis of Native American women who have gone missing and murdered. So today we're going to highlight a movement called MMIW, which stands for Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. And it is an honor today to have Monica Braine with us as we highlight MMIW. Monica, welcome on the podcast today.
Hi, Rita. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. How's your day going?
It's going pretty good. We're just about to get into the holidays, and I'm enjoying a day off.
Yes, I hear you. Yes, same on this end. We're kind of last minute total crunch and family coming in tonight. But thank you for joining us. I would like for you to tell all of those that have taken time out of their busy day to listen in just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Monica Braine, and I am Assiniboine and Papa Lakota. So on my father's side, my father is both Assiniboine and Papa Lakota. His mother was from the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, which is where my father and I are both enrolled. And his father was from the Standing Rock Reservation, which some people might be familiar with from the big fight over the pipeline. And on my mom's side, I'm white. And I have... So I want to give you just a little warning. I have a couple of dogs.
Okay, no problem.
I have done everything in my power to make them behave. I have some treats here, but I'll quickly go into mute.
Understandable.
So anyway, I've had a really interesting career. I've worked in museums. I've worked for National Geographic. But the last 10 years, I've been a journalist. I was the senior producer for the radio show Native America Calling, which is a live call-in radio show on about between 70 and 75 stations across the U.S. It goes live 5 days a week. And during that time, I covered, I produced shows on a variety of topics, from everything from, learning about cultural things like cradle boards to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds like a wide variety.
Yeah, it is. And just recently in July, I left journalism to work at Amarant Risk, which is a Native-owned insurance company. But what I do is I work for a part of the company called Amarant Critical Infrastructure. And what I'm doing is I'm helping tribes bring broadband to their reservations, because the internet, as if you're Native and listening to this, as you know, the internet on reservations is garbage.
Yes, so, much needed.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit about yourself with us. Monica, can you just tell us about MMIW and how this movement is so vital to the safety of Native American women and your involvement with MMIW?
Yeah, so the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women has, so first let me say that there's always, since colonization, right? Since Columbus showed up, missing and murdered Indigenous women has been an issue. But it isn't until the last, I would say maybe 20, 25 years that it actually has come up in the national media, or been brought to people's attention, right?
Right.
And so it has its origins. So I'm not going to say like for sure its origins are this place or that place, but one place that people point to where the phrase MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, started in Canada. And activists were pointing out how many missing Native women there were. In Canada, they have three distinct groups: the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. And sometimes they use the term Aboriginal as a catch-all. I'll be using the term Native throughout this interview just to sort of simplify things. So Native women are missing and disproportionately murdered in Canada. And in 2014, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, did put out a report about missing and murdered Indigenous women. It was specifically about murdered women. And they said that about 1,000 Aboriginal women had been murdered in the past 30 years, which is, again, disproportionate to the population of Aboriginal Native women in Canada. And then later in 2016, the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, issued what's called a national inquiry. Mm-hmm. We don't have things like this here in the US. I think maybe like the closest would be the Government Accountability Office, GAO, doing an investigation. Mm-hmm. But the national inquiry, they investigated missing and murdered Indigenous women from 2016 to 2019. And they came out with a number of how many may be missing. But activists have always sort of disputed that and said there's probably a lot more. And we can get into this later, but it has a lot to do with jurisdictional issues. It has a lot to do with Native women being a minority in society and not being paid attention to as much as, for example, let's say a white woman going missing and the entire country is looking for her. Yes. On social media. So it's not until the last couple of years that the US government has even begun to acknowledge that there's an issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women in the United States. And that's pretty significant. And I think that it has to do with, the attention that the Canadian government has paid to it, and the hard work the activists are doing to sort of shine a light on this issue.
Yes. Now, has there ever been like any personal experience or worry within your family of having someone go missing?
Yeah. So one of the other questions you asked, which I didn't answer, is you asked about my involvement in it. And so my involvement professionally has really just been to report on it, to talk with activists, to interview family members of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and bring their voices to the radio, to Native America Calling. Personally, in my family, my grandmother's mother, my great grandmother, on my father's side, she was murdered by her husband in a murder-suicide back in the 1800s, and that caused a lot of issues for my grandmother growing up. as an orphan. It was a very traumatic situation for her. I also have, various family members that struggle with mental health issues and addiction. And, in particular, I have one family member that just recently I was looking up how to file a missing persons report on her. She's 18. She has serious mental health issues and she ended an addiction problem, and she just dropped off the radar. Had lost her phone, dropped off the radar, and was gone for about 3 weeks, and it was really challenging because you don't know, if someone is missing or if they're just hiding out because they don't want to be held accountable for their behavior. And I know that families of addicts know this routine well. So the day that I was looking up how to file a missing persons report, which by the way, in New Mexico is not easy. You cannot do it online. It looks like you need to call the police. The police are completely overwhelmed here. They often don't even show up if you call about a burglary or things like that. So I can't imagine how much attention they'll pay to missing people. But that day she showed up and said, apologize for going off the off the radar. And
so she just came back herself.
Yeah, she did. But it brought up a lot of thoughts about when we have missing people, particularly who are in that vulnerable category, right? And how do you get the police to take it seriously when their lives are filled with chaos and addiction and serious issues.
Yes, that's difficult. That's difficult alone without the law enforcement being involved in all those issues. But I appreciate you shedding some light on this part of it for us. And we just appreciate all your work and your investment into helping make the world a safer place. And you have such a unique contribution to MMIW with the shows that you've produced for Native America Calling. And we're so grateful for that. So thank you. Monica, was there any other stats that you wanted to add?
This is the thing, is that statistics are really challenging, right? When it comes to, because if I had reported my cousin, then she would go into the statistics of missing, right? And at the end of the year, but then she's found, right? And a lot of times people don't go back and report that. And so to get accurate numbers of people who are missing is challenging, particularly Native women who are missing.
Yes.
I will say that there's like a lot of citizen journalism, citizen activism work around this, where there's Facebook groups, missing women, missing Native people Facebook groups that have popped up. There's an individual on the Navajo reservation who had created their own sort of alert system, text alert system. And I would occasionally get these like silver alert because there was an older elder missing, and things like that. And literally this is because they're, it's like trying to find workarounds to problems that could easily be solved if there was a lot more cooperation among law enforcement agencies and a lot more understanding about historical trauma and things like that. So I'm hesitant to give you like straight up numbers. There's a woman in California who's been doing her own research. Her name is Anita Lucchese, and she literally just started with an Excel spreadsheet and has just been keeping track as family members tell her, people and things like that. And she's been able to sort of turn that into an organization that is focused on that issue.
Yes.
So I would, if you forced me to give an estimate, I would say that like there's probably between 500 and 1,500 Native women who are missing currently. And that, spans a life, spans like 30, 40 years. So like some of those women went missing, they've probably passed by this time or passed, but because of the time period and their age and things like that, but we still don't know what happened to them.
Yes. Well, thank you. And I know that's something, it's going to take a while to keep working on that data and really trying to see where we are and we'll never know what all has been. And
Yeah.
so, and I know it said you can always up the number because we just don't know the totality of everything. Monica, can you tell us what one of the biggest hurdles are to overcome injustice done to our women? And I think by now we might have an inkling of what that may be.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that activists have said over and over on our show on Native America Calling is that jurisdictional issues are really, really challenging in Native America, right? So you have 574 federally recognized tribes. And for our listeners, for our audience who may not know that, a federally recognized tribe is a semi-sovereign independent nation inside the United States. They're still subject to federal law, but in some cases they're not subject to state laws. They have their own governments. Some of them have their own governments, their own police forces, just depending on how big the tribe is and their situation within the states that they reside in. And so when you're dealing with missing and murdered and any kind of crime, really, you're intersecting with federal, state, and tribal laws, and all of those together really can create confusion. They can create issues with people passing the buck, not wanting to uh, take on an investigation. Folks, when it comes to the reservation, most crimes are the jurisdiction of the federal government, which means the FBI. And the FBI has their hands full with the number of things that the FBI covers. And so you see things like rapes and child abuse, things like that just sort of slipping through the cracks because the FBI doesn't have the bandwidth to take on all of the crime that happens in and around reservations. So one of the things that again, these hardworking advocates and folks in Congress worked on to sort of address this issue was in 2013, the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. That set up a scenario or set up a situation so that tribes could prosecute non-natives in their tribal courts for specific crimes. And so the reason why that's important is because I'm not going to say like all of the crimes, but there were a lot of circumstances and there were a lot of examples that women were giving of being battered by their non-native partner or their partner who was native, but not the tribe that they were living on, not the reservation they were living on. And them not being able, the tribal police would come out and the man would say, "You can't arrest me," and they would try to mediate the situation, but their hands were really tied. And what the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, as it's called, what it did is it set up a special domestic violence criminal jurisdiction situation. And so tribal courts that choose to participate in that do have the ability to prosecute, but only for 3 crimes: domestic violence, violation of a restraining order, and dating violence. is another category of domestic violence. And that's it. Not child abuse, not a number of other crimes. So right now, where it stands, that VAWA needs to be reauthorized again, and folks are working on, expanding that. And there's definitely naysayers who say, like a non-native person being tried in a native court, they're never going to get a fair trial, those kinds of things. But the restrictions and the sort of checks and balances in place for tribal courts are more stringent than regular courts in many cases. And so, I would really challenge that notion that they're not going to get a fair trial.
Right. Well, thank you so much. It is certainly a big hurdle that Indian Nation faces today, and we've experienced that same frustration in our own personal lives, being Cherokee, and all the how would you say, the hoops you got to jump through to get stuff done. So it's real.
Yeah, but Rita, your nation has their reservation, their jurisdictions were reaffirmed most recently in a big Supreme Court case called McGirt.
Yes.
And what we're seeing is the nation having a lot more authority and autonomy over the crimes and the situations that happen within the boundaries of the reservation.
Time to get those treats. We'll pick up from there. My next question for you is if you can think of a case where the challenge of law enforcement was present.
Yeah. So I would say the most glaring case probably is the murder of Ashlyn Mike.
Yes. Yes. I remember that day.
Yeah. So it was in 2016 when this happened. And Ashlyn Mike was a little girl. I think she was about 11, maybe 10. And she lived on the Navajo Nation in Shiprock.
Mm-hmm.
And she was walking home from school with her brother one day, and a red van pulled up and asked her and her brother if they wanted a ride. They got in the car and took a ride with this individual. And then the little brother, and then they were missing they didn't come home from school. And I want to say that it was like maybe an hour or two after they were expected home, her mother, who lived in California, found out that she was missing, and she called the police, and they didn't really listen to her, as she has said on our show, that that when she called the police, they didn't really pay attention to what she was trying to say about her kids missing. And then when the father got home from work, he filed a missing persons report at 6 p.m. And then family members were calling. They were calling the police in Farmington. They were calling the police at Shiprock. And then they were working to put together search and rescue situations to try and find these missing kids. A couple found the little boy a little bit later that evening, walking along the road by himself, and they picked him up, and it was her brother, and he told the story of that a guy in a van had picked them up, and he had kicked the brother out. So the situation with law enforcement in this case was really, it's hard to say, like, if it's It was a situation where people didn't know the protocols of what was supposed to happen. But it was obvious as soon as they had picked up that brother that this qualified for Amber Alert. So Amber Alerts are for children that have been abducted. I think a lot of people think that Amber Alerts are for kids that are missing in general, but it's really cases of known cases of abduction. And it was clear that this was what happened. The little brother had told them that. And I believe it was like the state police said, it's not, when they called and said, can you do an Amber Alert? Like family members called and said, please put out an Amber Alert. The state police said, no, it's the Navajo Nation's police's responsibility to contact us or contact someone to do the Amber Alert. And then the Navajo Nation police say that they followed the protocols and procedures on what they were supposed to do for the Amber Alert. But eventually what happened was the FBI called the National Center for Missing and Murdered, or National Center for Missing People or Missing Children. And the Amber Alert went out around 2:30 a.m. after the children had been reported missing at 6. And unfortunately, Ashlyn Mike was murdered, and her body was found. And it wasn't long before they apprehended the individual who was responsible for it. His name is Tom Begay. And he confessed to it right away, within like a few minutes of the interrogation, and is doing life in prison for it. And he sexually assaulted her and killed her. And so the thing that I really heard from Ashlyn Mike's mother, Pamela, when she would come on our show, she's called in several times when she would come on Native America Calling, was that she just didn't feel heard, and she felt helpless, particularly because she lived in California and wasn't there to be able to help with the situation. And so she was calling and trying to find out where her kids were. And law enforcement really failed her in that situation. And I think that that's like a really good example of, you have multiple jurisdictions and it's not clear. And of course, now there's been trainings and it's crystal clear, and some legislation came out of it, out of this really unfortunate incident. So I don't know. I think about like what it would be like if there was if like a community, everybody in the community on their phones had the app that your company has developed. Would that have prevented the situation? And if it was like on some sort of closed circuit Wi-Fi situation, maybe, but the Navajo Nation is one of the least connected. You still have people who don't have electricity and running water on the Navajo Nation. And so broadband is, and the access to Wi-Fi is very limited. When the couple found the little boy walking on the road, they couldn't even call 911. They had to drive to the police station with the kid because there was nothing. There was no service in that area. But it makes me hopeful to think about this app that you guys are developing, because maybe there's this possibility to sort of leapfrog over these issues with jurisdiction to really like join forces and solve our problems ourselves, solve these problems ourselves, alerting people right away, like, right. Hey, I can't find my kid. They didn't check in or something like that.
Yes. Well, we enjoy providing avenues to make sure people are more safe. But one thing about, I appreciate, first of all, you recapping this difficult piece of history. And our hearts still hurt for the little girl and the family, the community. And I will never, never, never forget the day, because at the time my kids were only 3, 5, and 7. And, you couldn't do anything but just stop and try to even imagine the whole situation. You just cry, It was a very sad day, but thank you so much, because it reminds us in this of just the need of still the continued need for law enforcement for our safety and where that's concerned. And so I'm thankful that we are doing all that we can on this end, and that you are here speaking with all of us today to shed light to those that might be listening in that weren't even aware of this case and all the other stuff that's going on in the background with the ongoing crisis for murder and missing Indigenous women. And I want you to just, if you don't mind, just highlight one more piece of information that you had shared with me. And it shows the magnitude of murdered and missing Indigenous women. And so I want you to tell us about a passage or a highway that it inherited a name for itself, and why.
Yeah, this is in Canada, and it's called the Highway of Tears. And it's a 400-mile stretch between Prince George and Prince Rupert, British Columbia. And the estimates are that between 20 and 40 Indigenous women have gone missing along this highway for a variety of reasons. The walking along the road, being abducted, breaking down, things like that. And of course, activists say the number is much higher. The police say it's much lower, right? But the reality is that it is this really challenging stretch of road that sort of puts visually what Native women are facing.
Yes.
When it comes to this issue. It's like, do I drive down this road, or is this it for me? Is this when I will go missing?
Right. Well, thank you so much. Until you told me about that, I hadn't heard of the Highway of Tears. So thank you so much. Monica, you have definitely helped us today to let our listeners know of the ongoing issues concerning the safety and the livelihood of Native American women and girls. And so before we go, can you tell our listeners how they can get more involved? Maybe a website, Facebook page that they could visit for more information?
Yeah, I cannot recommend more the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center, and I'll provide the link to that to you if you want to add it to your page.
Okay.
For this podcast. They have a variety of good resources on this issue. Also, visit Native America Calling, and you can do a search for MMIW or Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, and all of the shows that we've done in the last 7 to 8 years will show up, and you can go back and listen to them. Just listen to them on your computer, or add them as a podcast, things like that, and then just talk to the people in your community, and Native folks will tell you about this issue, and they may have a personal story about it.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, we will definitely post the information that Monica just shared with us in the comments below, as well as links on some of the information that you heard here today. So thank you very much, Monica. Thank you so much for joining us today and bringing your heart and your passion for MMIW and Indian country. And we just, you are such an asset to Native Americans, and we just thank you from the bottom of our heart. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Rita. Thanks for putting up with my my noisy little dog rodeo in the background.
It is no problem. It is no problem. And I just wanted to say a special thank you to all of you out there watching and listening to this podcast. Thanks for taking time. we've highlighted on Indigenous women today, but really it doesn't matter what your background or your culture, native, non-native, whether you live on the reservation or maybe you live downtown. As women, we've got to be watching out for women and watching out for one another. So please tell someone about this ongoing crisis and share this link. You know, our goal here at Parker IoT Solutions is to provide solutions for safety. And one way that we do that is by providing information such as we did today. And so we want to do our part in letting the world know what's going on in the world where safety is concerned. And so we want to get a safety tool into people's hand that can help protect you in an unforeseen situation, such as we heard about today. You know, you've heard there's an app for that. Well, we've got an app for that, an app called Savu. And it resides on your smartphone, your smart devices, and it can alert authorities in a dire situation. So as a matter of fact, it's so simple. It alerts authorities with just the simple shake of your device. And there's going to be a link provided to see more information on this life-saving app. And it has the potential to save your life, and it also lowers crime around the world. So we just want to say thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on our next podcast. So please stay safe.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Safe, Secure, and Empowered 24/7 podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please click the like button, share, and subscribe to follow us. We would love to hear from you, so please take a moment and leave a comment. You can also find us at our website, www.parkeriot-solutions.com. Make sure you follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.